everyone, welcome back to our channel. I'm Rachel.
I'm Nikki and we're the Stitch Sisters.
And today's video we are going to answer all the questions that we get asked all the time. So if there are things that you're dying to know about us, keep watching. Well, what do you think?
Now that you're blonde, I think it's more confusing.
It is, but unless we were sisters that were estranged and brought up in different countries and therefore have different accents.
Yes.
Or you acquired a strong Scottish accent as an adult after we went our separate ways.
Tis my acting skills, ladies. Tis my acting skills. No, we're not sisters.
No.
We never have been. We are sisters in the Stitch.
Yes, Stitch Sisters. When we were thinking of a name, we liked the alliteration, but also we, by that point, were firm friends and friends to the point where we feel like sisters.
Yes.
So we thought, well, why the hell not be sisters?
Also, Scissor Sisters was taken.
It was taken by
the Scissor Sisters.
By the Scissor Sisters. But yes, and also with Scissor Sisters, you can do anything with scissors. It doesn't necessarily indicate sewing. It could be could be hair cutting. It could be anything. So but stitch.
Yes.
Stitching is stitching, isn't it?
Yes. So we do feel like sisters, but we're not actually biological sisters.
Absolutely
I
not.
was born in Scotland and you were born in Kent.
No, in Surrey.
In Surrey. Well, nearly
Thames
right.
Ditton.
Thames Ditton.
Yes.
So we only met, how long ago was it now? 8 years ago?
Well, I moved to the village in 2013 and so we would have met that year.
Yeah.
So that's what, 9
years
ago. Yeah, we'll be 9 years now. So I started sewing, the first memory that I have was my mum making matching dresses for my sister and I to wear to church, and because that was kind of where we always had to wear matching outfits.
And the best outfits, yes.
And my mum was a great seamstress, and so she was in the middle of making matching dresses for my sister and I was about 3, and she left the room to check on my baby brother, and when she came back she found me with a pair of scissors in my hand, having cut a big hole in the back of whatever she was working on, saying, "It's okay, mummy, I finished it for you." And so she then had to go into town and buy more fabric so that she could then finish the matching dresses ready for church the next day. So yeah, thanks mum, that was very sweet of you to put that much effort into our outfits. But yes, that was my first memory of sewing. My mum reminded me recently actually of something that I'd totally forgotten about, but one summer she'd made us all Bermuda shorts.
Right.
And so she had fabrics left over. This was the 80s, so Bermuda shorts were
big
funky fabrics. Think of Club Tropicana.
With the parrots involved.
I can't remember. I don't even remember this at all. This is just what my mum told me. So what I do remember is one summer us making over the shed and turning it into our playhouse. So they let us clear it out and paint it, and I apparently made patchwork curtains from the leftover Bermuda short fabrics. Now,
wonderful.
I have no memory of this whatsoever. I remember there being curtains. I even remember putting shelves up, and I remember putting my favourite Labrador pictures up on the wall. But I don't remember making these curtains, but apparently I did.
Amazing. So your first trip into sewing was actually patchwork.
Yes.
Lovely.
Who knew?
Who knew?
You didn't even know that story,
I didn't know
you?
that
I just
story.
remembered because my mum told me recently when I was chatting to her on the phone. But my first memory that I actually kind of remember sewing for the same reasons that I do today for my style was when I was about 13. I had found a pattern in a charity shop for a 1970s kind of two-piece. I'm actually wearing a 1970s two-piece today, so not a lot has changed.
How fashion comes around.
Yes, but this was a pair of wide leg flares and a waistcoat, and I was desperate to make it, and so my mum took me shopping into Fabricland in Kingston, which was our nearest big fabric shop.
Nice.
And I chose a black and white pinstripe suiting
Okay.
And then, because I always liked a little pop of colour, I chose a bright red lining for
Lovely.
my waistcoat. And then she helped me make them. And when I say helped, I did a lot of observing.
Okay.
Less helping, being a 13-year-old. If I could get my mum to do it, I was going to. But I did enough, and that kind of opened my eyes to the idea that you could see something that interested you, especially if it was something that you wouldn't find in the shops, and you could just create it. And the magic of dressmaking was then kind of opened up to me.
Was that? Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story. Well, mine, I was a bit later because you were 13. I was probably, I don't know, 30, 36, 37 by the time I started sewing. I had done various crafts. I had done pottery, I'd done photography, I'd done baking, I'd done card making, I'd done all kinds of things. I was looking for something and none of them really stuck. The closest was pottery, but actually building a kiln in my garden was one step too far. So I didn't quite, and I just think the logistics of that was just a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
I did it for the enjoyment rather than as anything else. And then I remember seeing a patchwork quilt, but it was a hand sewn hexagon English paper piecing quilt. And I don't know whether it was in a magazine or something like that, but I absolutely fell in love with it and ended up buying a pack of Liberty squares because I thought this was the only place that this was the fabric and this is how you did it.
Okay.
And so I bought this Liberty squares, and I remember buying.
She's always had expensive taste.
I do. I just can't help it. And the little pack of hexagons, and I started sewing them together and got completely hooked. And it was kind of love at first sight. It was the hand sewing. It was the intimacy of it. It was the fabrics. It was everything like that. And I actually quite like the slowness of it. There's always been a meditative quality, mindfulness that I really enjoy. And I have two different types of sewing. So my sewing room sewing on the machine can be that, but actually my hand sewing has always been my meditativeness. So I started doing that, and then just kind of got a bit not lazy, but I just wanted it to happen quicker. So a friend of mine took me to John Lewis one day, and we bought a sewing machine. So that was my first sewing machine, and then she taught me how to sew. So I then started quilting on the machine, and then got completely addicted. And you know how I am with my production line. I ended up making, instead of making one makeup bag, I'd make 27 makeup bags. And so I ended up starting to sell the stuff that I was making. And then that was what I was doing. I was quilting and making stuff for shops and to sell at fairs and things like that.
Sat in the cold at handmade fairs for hours on end.
God, never again. Trying to sell, something where you're making 50p profit on it, and people are coming up going, "I could make that." Oh God, anyway, terrible. So I'm not doing that again. And then I met Rachel, and I'd never really considered dressmaking. I just thought dressmaking was too difficult for me because I just saw it as a different part of the process that I'd never really kind of thought about. And so you properly introduced me to dressmaking and held my hand and I took my first baby steps into making basic tank tops and things like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And then you reintroduced me to quilting.
Yes.
I'd done some as a teenager, but I'd never learned how to do it properly. And Nikki was always very precise in her method. And so that was a whole different way of sewing for me, because for me, sewing creatively, to be completely honest, even though I've been dressmaking for a long time, I was quite a bodger. Not that probably exaggerates. No. I was just, if there was a shortcut, I was going to take it.
You were a corner cutter.
I didn't worry about what the insides looked like. I was so desperate to make something and wear it as early as possible that I just wanted to make it as quickly as possible. And doing everything to the letter and following the rules. I was definitely a rule breaker. And so this whole new form of, with quilting, if you don't follow the rules, you're going to end up with a mess.
Yes.
You can't just kind of style it up and then wear it out. Everyone's going to see it. So you have to really follow the rules. So that was really nice for me to kind of learn that discipline. Yeah. And that discipline probably has now influenced
a lot of your sewing
my
now.
dressmaking, because these days I'm the complete opposite, and everything has to be done to
perfectly.
perfection, inside and out. Otherwise, I'm not happy.
No longer will you go out with your hem undone on a skirt or a hole in a jacket where you've not actually
the lining. I've turned it through and not finished it.
There have been jackets where you've worn it for a year still with the lining
I've got
undone
some
on the sleeve.
I still haven't closed the hole in the lining. I was so desperate to wear it, I couldn't find the time to sit down and hand sew it. But yeah, it's funny, and one thing that's really interesting about our sewing is that it might seem like I've been sewing for a really long time, obviously starting so young. It was very much an on-off relationship with sewing. So I did bits and pieces in my teens, and then I had a break for pretty much most of my 20s. If I needed to take up a pair of curtains, or if I wanted to quickly knock up some cushions or something like that, then I would borrow, in fact my sewing machine lived at my parents' house, so I would borrow it back from them, and then give it back to them. So I didn't even have a sewing machine that stayed permanently in my house for pretty much a whole decade. And it wasn't again until I was having children, and I was pregnant with my first, and I wanted to create a nice nursery for him.
Right.
So I took up sewing again so that I could make curtains and a quilt and a cot bumper and one of those organiser things that hangs over the side and a matching cushion to sit in the rocking chair and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of got me back into sewing. And then dressmaking followed shortly after that as a way to address my mummy body, my changed body after having had a baby.
And although I came to sewing late, it's been constant. It's been kind of, since that love affair with that first packet of Liberty Squares, that's been it. I haven't stopped.
Exactly.
And it's become so much a part of my life with everything. So I've made up for it.
You've definitely, I'd say in terms of sewing experience, these days we're definitely on a par. I will always have more dressmaking experience because I started sooner. You will always have more quilting experience because you started sooner. But like most things in our lives, the kind of attributes that we bring to the table have definitely rubbed off on each other. And now kind of our partnership covers pretty much everything that we would need to know.
One of the things that I like now is that when we want to learn something, because there's always something to learn, we do it together. And it's not Rachel's doing one thing and I'm doing another. We're learning processes and rubbing off on each other and passing skills from one to the other and doing it as best buddies.
Yes, we have then. So that was a long answer. What's the next question? So sewing for me has always been about the creative side of things, but it's always been influenced by a love of fashion, and so for me it's always been about clothes, wanting to recreate certain looks and a certain style, and to find a way to make that work for my changing body. Over the years I've learned that there's no such thing as something that doesn't suit you. It's just finding a way of making it suit your body and suit your style. So whatever kind of style, line or shape or whatever you think, oh well, I couldn't wear that, with a few tweaks you usually can, and there's been very few things that with a few tweaks I haven't been able to then get to a point where I feel happy wearing it. So to me that's like magic. I just love that. I think it's almost like a superpower, and it just so it gives me this creative outlet, but it also gives me this enormous sense of achievement, and it's where I take a lot of my kind of positive reinforcement about myself, is from the things that I make, and being able to create things, and that kind of sense of satisfaction that it gives you. But I also love the more technical side of sewing. So I've got quite an academic brain, I suppose, quite a technical brain, and so
problem-solving brain.
But I love maths, and I love geometry, and I love angles, and I love the whole concept of changing something flat and 2D into 3D, and understanding the processes for how that happens, but also how to draft patterns, how to make things fit, and the technical elements of sewing as well. When I learn a new technique or I see a pattern shape that I've never seen before, I genuinely get so excited. Like I'll send Nikki pictures and be like, look at this, and I just get Really excited.
I'm making a coat at the moment, which has got an unusual sleeve, and as soon as I cut the pattern piece out, I was like, right, I've got to send this to Rachel.
And I was like, what? I was like looking at it all going, well, that's a dart and that's a pleat, and what's it going to be?
I'm looking at it going, what? Like, slightly terrified, and she's like overexcited.
Yeah,
so
I absolutely love it. And then also these days I really enjoy the more technical side of tailoring as well. I like using lots of different interfacing, lots of hand sewing techniques. I like kind of all the little tweaks and the insides of a garment that you wouldn't know was there. I'm fascinated by how you create structure. I'm fascinated by the way fabric moves, just the whole kind of process of fabric and the way it feels, and how you manipulate it, that I find enormously fascinating. So I'm basically a massive geek.
She's a
when
massive
it comes
geek.
to sewing. I'm a massive geek and proud of it.
Yes, absolutely. It's so beneficial. I'm the complete opposite, and you often laugh at me because it's all about the actual process for me. It's the process of, and I think it's my love affair with sewing, is the actual sewing. So I love cutting the fabric, I love putting the patterns together, I love doing all of that, getting everything just right, taking my time, actually sewing and pressing and hand stitching and doing all of that. And I get slightly sad when I get to the end. I know this is really bizarre, but the amount of times that I make things and then I don't actually try them on for a few days because I think I am kind of slightly in mourning for the fact
or
that
you procrastinate. You get 90% of the way through a project, and because you know the end is coming, you kind of like put it to one side because you're not ready for it to end just yet.
Don't want to finish it yet. Or I'll convince myself that the next bit is just too tricky, so I'll need Rachel's help with it or something like that, or which I don't. It's just I get to that point where, and I think that it is procrastination. I think that it's the actual process of sewing. It's the creativity. It's making something from nothing, and it's that. And I just enjoy all of the processes. Like this coat that I'm making at the moment. We're both making a coat at the moment, and like every step I've been kind of reveling in. It's almost like I'm wallowing in making this coat. If you could, and I'm sure some of you will understand.
Stroking welt pockets.
Stroking, but pressing it and going, oh, it's not quite pressed right. Just keep, and that's another 20 minutes of pressing. Oh, that's perfect. And it just kind of, I think I'm elongating it and actually stretching it out and making it last. I will love it, and I will love the coat, and I wear all the things that I make. But I think sometimes the actual process of the construction is more appealing to me than just putting it in my wardrobe.
Yeah, but
I
think that's because you have that same kind of mindfulness, that same love that you have for hand sewing, and the reason you love quilting.
Yeah,
it's that process, whether it's hand sewing or even if it's quilting on the machine. That whole process of cutting squares and then gradually, or whatever shapes, gradually sewing them together, and it getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you've got a sashing and a border and a backing and binding and quilting and sandwiching, and you've got so many processes.
Yes,
and during that whole time, you don't give yourself a deadline or anything. You're just like, oh, it's time for this next step. Oh, it's time for this next step. But you're never in a rush to have the thing.
No,
it's not about the thing.
I've never experienced that. I've never experienced it. It would be finished when it's finished, and I'd always enjoy taking my time with it. But I don't think I've rushed through anything. I think I wallow in it. I'm a wallower.
Yes.
You're a geek, I'm a wallower.
Well, I'm already planning before I finish sewing something, how I'm going to wear it, how I'm going to style it, what accessories I need. I'll start scouting the charity shops because I haven't got quite the right bag or quite the right glasses or necklace or something for how I envisage wearing this item that I haven't even finished sewing yet.
I do think about that, and I do think about that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, it's not my main love of sewing is the actual process. But I'm still making clothes that fit me now. I'm still making clothes that I love. I'm still making things that are fashion forward and that I'm genuinely excited about. But my favourite part of the whole thing is actually making the garments.
And the planning.
I love the planning.
You love fabric buying.
Yes.
You love
patterns, shopping. Yeah. I do all of that, and that's all part of it. But when I used to make quilts, when I still make quilts, when I hand sew them, I will be planning my next hand sewn quilt before I finished the one that I'm on, and I've often done that.
Yeah.
And kind of been buying the fabric and just buying this fabric and putting that there because that will be my next one. So I think
Stockpiling.
I'm stockpiling, but I'm always about making things in bulk as well.
Yeah.
I like having a big pile of things that are ready to be made and stuff, and I still do that with dressmaking.
Yeah, I think that's where the procrastination comes from sometimes, because you haven't got your next project lined up.
Yes.
So you don't want this one to be over until you figure out what the next one is going to be, and you've started the process of at least buying fabric and patterns and that kind of thing.
It's very interesting. I think it's really interesting to find out people's motivation or the things that they love. But we all get to the same point in the end, and we all have lovely things that we can wear and make us feel good about ourselves.
Although I think on a more emotional level, our reasons for sewing are much more similar, because it's definitely for self-care. I think for both of us.
Absolutely,
yeah. But also I think it is such a huge part of my identity, whether that's actually style or whether it's, like, say, this sense of achievement that I get from making. It's such a big part of who I am that if I wasn't able to do that anymore, I would genuinely be a different person. I would be very sad.
Yeah.
So
and it's such
good for mental health.
Such a big part of who I am as well.
Yeah.
And considering I hadn't done any dressmaking until we met, it has changed my outlook to fashion and everything like that completely.
Yeah.
And when I met Rachel, I was completely in the mummy zone, having twin boys at primary school. It was, I was still lost, really. So I feel like sewing has helped me kind of get over that and become more the person that I was, but a slightly different version of the person that I was.
More sophisticated,
more creative.
Yeah, and I think that's why for a lot of people kind of looking from the outside in, or we've discovered this fairly recently, that our obsession with bright colours and kind of more bold kind of fashion choices.
Do you like bright colours? I couldn't tell.
Don't know what gave you that impression. But I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we were experiencing this this sense of freedom that we've not had since we were a lot younger, since maybe teenagers, where you wear whatever you want and you embrace the quirky and the different and that kind of thing. And I think that that's a passion that we now both share.
Absolutely.
And that means we bounce off of each other. So it's like, but also if the person you spend the most time with is as extra as you are, then you never feel extra or too much. So it just keeps building and building and building.
You get dragged up to be as extra as they are. No, we're definitely both on the same page. We're always on the same page with a lot of things. The amount of times that we both we end up saying, I'll say to her, I found this, I really want to make this, and she's gone, literally, I was looking at that pattern yesterday.
Yeah.
And so we are, it's like we
hive
have
mind.
Hive mind. Yeah. Right, next question.
When did you first meet? Well, we met, so I'd seen Nikki in the village. We'd not officially met, but I'd seen her on the way up to school.
Stalking me.
Well, I just kind of, you know what it's like when you're in a new place, you kind of you clock different people and you're trying to figure out kind of who's who and whatever else. And most of the mums up at the village school didn't live in the village. So I was kind of, various people would point out, and somebody had said to me, oh, that lady lives in the village. And so obviously I was keen to meet her at some point, but it just hadn't happened.
No.
And then one of the kids was doing some sort of after school club, and they were down at the playing fields in our village, and so I was standing on the sidelines and you were too.
Yeah.
And then you came over and introduced yourself and said, hi, I'm Nikki, and told me where you lived, and we had a very brief chat.
Over the football pitch.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that, we kind of hit it off or anything.
No, it was just a polite hello.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then we met a few times on the school run, so on the walk up to school or the walk down from school.
Yeah, so you'd always be friendly and say hello because it's a neighbour, and you wouldn't kind of be rude or anything, but at the same time it's not like we were kind of desperate to chat to each other or anything like that.
Well, so after we'd met a few times, I remember the time when we were walking down from school, and I think it was one morning.
Yes.
So we were kind of like ready for the day. We just dropped the kids off, that kind of thing. And I think I said to you, what are you doing? What you got planned for the day? And you said, oh, I've got a dress to sew, I've got a dress to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, I'm going home to do some quilting. And it was this moment where the both of us just went,
You sew?
hello. And it was like we looked at each other in a slightly different light. She at that moment, you no longer just became a neighbour.
Yes.
You were someone I was going to get to know a lot better, because
Yeah.
you were someone who sewed, and it can be a very solitary hobby.
Definitely. I got excited then too. Although I kind of knew quilting kind of wasn't I didn't think quilting.
You all said
was
it
my
wasn't your thing, yeah.
But it was still, having somebody that likes to sew meant that our conversations would be more interesting, because we could actually chat about our common interests and that kind of thing. And so it kind of from there, next time we saw each other, we were kind of like, oh, so how's your quilt going? Did you finish that dress? Oh yeah, I'm on to this one now. And so it really was just kind of chit chat and sewing chat, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But obviously over time that progresses, doesn't it?
I think one of us said, oh, do you fancy coming over to mine and sewing at mine today, or having a coffee or something like that? So
yeah, well, I think actually what it was is we were having the debate about quilting and that kind of thing, and I said, oh, I remember my mum and like some of the ladies at her church kind of quilting when I saw it as a bit of a frumpy old lady thing, if I'm honest. And I don't know whether you showed me a picture or if you just told me that you like to use really bright colours and modern fabrics and that sort of thing. And I kind of was intrigued. And I think I said to you at one point, oh, maybe I should just give quilting another go. And you said, well, you could come over to mine and I could show you.
Yeah.
And so I came over to yours for coffee and an EPP lesson.
Oh, yes. I showed you how to hand sew. So that's just, I just love that. I love the fact that we were drawn together by hand sewing.
But then the first thing you did was go and get that giant...
My giant
quilt,
yes,
is all the colours and
all the fabrics,
but really bright and modern and scrappy, and that was not the quilting I imagined. That was not the kind of frumpy old lady quilting that I had in my head. And I apologise if that's offensive to anybody, but I think you know the kind of quilts that I mean, where everything's kind of brown and beige, and
I'm not
1980s patterns and that kind of thing. But this I was really impressed by it. And realised that there was this whole different aspect of quilting that I didn't know. The modern quilter.
Modern quilting you hadn't discovered.
No, I didn't know what a fat quarter was. I didn't know. I had never heard of like popular kind of quilting fabric companies like Riley Blake.
You'd never used a rosary cutter.
No, but so there was all this stuff that kind of opened up, and my mind was blown. So I started my own EPP quilt.
How's that going?
Never got past the back. And then eventually you said to me, I'd like to try dressmaking.
Yeah.
I think what it was is you had bought a sewing magazine and there was a free pattern included in that.
Yes.
And you were showing me the magazine and I had a look at the pattern and I said, oh, are you going to make this? And you said, oh no, I don't think I can make clothes. And I was like, don't be silly, of course you can.
Yeah.
So we agreed that I'd help you.
Yes.
Make
that first shell top or whatever it was.
Yeah, and it was a simple kind of almost vest top, woven vest top.
It was like a sleeveless, like shell top with a little button loop at the back.
Which is, I think you also made out of Liberty fabric.
I probably did. But I remember at that time, looking for fabric for this project, and I only looked at quilting shops. So I went to all of the quilting places that I knew that sold fabrics, and there's that moment where you realise that actually I don't really want to wear the fabrics that I'm using on the quilts, but I struggled for quite a while until I found some dressmaking stores and kind of understood a bit more about fabric, because I'd only ever been using cottons, cottons and wadding, and
usually bought in a fat quarter,
usually bought in very small pieces, and I had no concept about the amount of fabric that was needed to make stuff, or different types of fabric, viscose, and all of the different types of fabrics that you can use for dressmaking, which is so much better than just using a quilting cotton, especially with how expensive expensive they are and how thin they are.
Yeah, exactly.
So I made my first few tops out of quilting fabric, and then I was hooked, and then that was it.
So from that point, we were meeting up fairly regularly, weren't we? And helping each other out with various different sewing projects.
And doing friend things. We were going for lunch and we'd go shopping.
Yeah, absolutely. We were definitely friends at that point. And I remember one week, I think initially I'd been learning how to do web design, and I was looking for additional income. I was doing alterations and making dresses to order for people, but I wasn't kind of rushed off my feet or anything. And so I designed my own website for a different business that I was running. I was doing kind of vintage tea parties and that sort of thing at the weekends with my friends. And I knew that you sold jewellery. So I initially said to you, you should have a website. Why don't I design you a website? Because you sold everything through Facebook.
Yes.
And you were like, well, I'm not really sure that I need a website. And also I think maybe there was that kind of like, oh, hold on, if I actually do some work for you, that whole friendship thing gets a bit kind of tricky.
No, I just wasn't. I don't think that was the case. I think I
need it.
I think I was falling out of love with it at the time.
Yeah.
So actually committing to running a website was kind of putting a little bit more energy into the business than I really wanted.
Yeah, maybe. And so basically that was the kind of first idea that we might do something work related together. But then another time we'd met up, and I'd been doing alterations for a lady who was getting me to do stuff for her quite regularly. And at one point she kind of said, well, maybe if you could teach me, then I could do my own. Yeah. And I thought, well, hold on, because then I lose my income. So I don't want to teach you how to do your own alterations. But then I kind of mulled on that a little bit, and I thought, well, hold on, maybe there's something to this teaching. Maybe there are other people that want to learn how to sew and how to do those kind of things. And I knew at the same time you had, just like you had shown me, you taught several other friends how to quilt.
Yes.
So I knew that you had done a bit of kind of teaching as well. So I said to you, why don't we set up some sewing classes and we can both together teach people how to sew. You thought I was mad.
I thought you were mad. I remember looking at you going, where's this come from? Like, kind of like, so all of a sudden I was kind of like, do I want to go into business with you? This was kind of, it was just so out of the blue that I think and I was doing other things. So I was still doing the fairs, and I was still selling in shops, and I still felt really busy with all that, but I was falling out of love with it. And it just wasn't making me any money. And I think I was slightly scared. I was scared about kind of setting up another business and it not working or something like that.
But there's also pressure when you do it with someone else, because you immediately feel responsible to someone.
Yes.
And there's extra pressure to make it work. If you're just doing something for yourself, then the pressure's only coming from you. But whether it's pressure that someone's intentionally putting on you, or whether it's just the way you perceive it, it doesn't really matter. It still feels like there's more pressure for it to be successful. So you thought about it for a bit, didn't you?
Yeah, a couple of weeks, I think.
And I kept kind of mentioning it, and I could sense that you weren't appreciating me keep mentioning it, because it was kind of like, I said I'd think about it type thing. Like, stop going on about it. But
you were excited.
But you were saying, I'm still not sure. Do people really want to learn how to sew? We just didn't know. So the agreement that we had was that I said, okay, let's set up a Facebook page, and we will put up, because you can put events on there.
Yes.
And we'll put up a sewing class. And we'll see what happens, and then we'll know if there is any demand for it.
And in my head I'm thinking, well, that's a really safe way of doing it, because if it doesn't work, we can just delete it and pretend it never happened.
Yes, and you were fully expecting to do that. So we kind of thought about how we were going to teach it and whose house we were going to do it at, and realistically how many people, how many sewing machines we'd be able to fit, and all that kind of stuff. And we decided that we needed to have a maximum of 8. So we set up this event for a Learn to Sew class with 8 spaces available, and you were going to make a tote bag or something like that. And then within an hour we'd had our first booking.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh, okay.
Suddenly there was commitment.
Yeah. But then there was panic because it was like, but if there's only that one person, we can't just teach one person, we'll have to cancel. So, but within
2 or 3 days.
2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
all of the spaces
are
are
gone.
booked.
And we put other classes up.
Well,
by
as soon
that
as the
point.
first one was fully booked, we were getting messages from people saying, I've been looking for somewhere for ages I can learn sew, and I
can't do that day, or it's booked full now.
Yeah, so we immediately put up 2 extra dates.
Yes.
And then after our Learn to Sew class, we thought, well, hold on, because these people are really keen to come back. But they now know how to use a sewing machine.
Yeah, what do we teach them now?
What do we teach them now? So then we put up a cushion class.
Yes.
And then we decided, well, let's show them a bit of patchwork. And we started putting up all these different classes. And what was interesting was we were running a regular Learn to Sew class, and that was constantly fully booked. But then the people coming through that were desperate for the next thing to do. So because we'd run multiple sessions of Learn to Sew, we now had quite a few people on our roster, but every time we came up with a new class, there was only 8 spaces. So they would get snapped up so quickly.
Yeah, on average, we're at our peak.
Yeah.
We were probably doing 3 classes a week. So 3 different classes a week. 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening on 3 different days. So actually 6 classes altogether.
Yeah. At one point we even did morning, afternoon and evening to try and accommodate everyone.
Yeah.
We didn't keep that going for very long.
No.
Because we knew we just didn't have it in us.
No, and we loved it. Don't get us wrong. We absolutely loved it. And we did it for how long? 4 years?
Well, we started in 2014, June 2014, and we went online with the Stitch Sisters in February 2018.
Yeah.
So yeah.
4 years. Just under 4 years. But I think we'd kind of reach saturation point in our local area, because we're not in a big city or anything, we're just in the Cotswolds, but also I think you and I were exhausted. It's tiring doing that all the time and coming up with new classes all the time, and also having people in your house,
keeping it tidy. We always offered homemade cakes. There was a lot of baking and that kind of thing to do as well. And we realised quite quickly that most people, because we had lots of regulars, we needed new things all the time. So every month we'd come up with a new kind of timetable, and we would have all new classes in there except for regular kind of Learn to Sew classes and that sort of thing. And it was really hard to come up with new things all the time. So we kind of got to the point where we sort of ran out of ideas. But not only that, we'd have to make samples before we could even put up a class, because we needed to make sure that it all worked.
By fabric, usually we supplied fabric for most of the things. So if it was a small item, or a bag or something like that, we'd supply the fabric.
But not only that, it was all pre-prepared, because usually we had a maximum of 2 hours to make this thing. So the only way that we could do that was to pre-cut everybody's materials. So you're talking about hours and hours of getting that ready.
It really, in the end, it really wasn't financially viable.
No, it really wasn't. We were doing it for love.
We're doing it for love and for the community that we created.
Yes.
We had this big community of sewers who we loved to see, and we loved to teach them to sew and see how they were evolving. And they became a community, and they really enjoyed spending time together.
There's lots of friendships that came out of that time. People that met people at our sewing classes and have stayed friends since, and a lot of people reconnecting, because it was lots of people from the local area. People would turn up to a class and go, oh, I went to school with you, or you used to be my babysitter, or we had so many different connections being made. It was really lovely.
But we had lots of teachers, we had lots of nurses, we had lots of people in kind of high stress jobs who would come. And it was almost like to come and have a hug from us. So they would come
Hugs
and
with sewing.
they'd be made tea, they'd get some cake, they'd have all their fabrics cut out for them, and they'd just sit and quietly spend 2 hours chatting to other people who loved sewing, having a bit of a giggle and making a bag. And it was lovely.
It was lovely, but it got to the point where we would have to decide, in order for us to continue doing that at that rate, the only way we could really consider it would be to open premises where we could teach more than 8 people at a time, where we could hire teachers, where we could potentially sell fabrics and do all of those kind of things. Now that not only was a huge step up in terms of risk and investment, but by that point, like I said, we were running out of ideas, and we've kind of lost our enthusiasm for it a little bit. So that is not the time to embark on a huge kind of new, more risky adventure.
We still had kids at primary school, so the complications of that and us doing it ourselves and having a storefront that you had to open from 9 till 5 every day, including Saturdays, was a huge commitment. And but also then we were running classes in the evening, so actually we would have been open from 9 in the morning until maybe 11 o'clock at night. And it was just too much. It was too much. So we decided to go a different route.
Yes, exactly. And we've got a huge amount of respect for anybody that runs a sewing school, runs a sewing shop, that does classes and that kind of thing. We only kind of ran through the the options in our multiple times. We would consider it very, very seriously and get to the point where we draw up a business plan, but then we knew that it wasn't viable for us. So for anybody that does do that, hats off to them, because it's such a huge amount of work.
It's such hard work.
And it's not to say that what we do now isn't a lot of work, but it's not reliant on certain opening hours, or we can structure it around our lives and our families.
We're still extremely flexible, and we still feel like our own bosses. We still feel like it's our business. We have that flexibility.
So we went in a different direction, and we decided that maybe what we could do is consider teaching people online. And there weren't many people doing that at the time, and there certainly weren't people doing the kind of thing that we were doing. And we just thought, let's take exactly what we do in our classes in person and take that online. And so the first thing that we had to do was to actually figure out how technically we were going to make that happen.
But we had been doing YouTube and stuff like that, so the filming part we felt fine with. But obviously, how do you then get that product to people?
How do you have that content online? How do you protect it so that it's only available to people who have bought it? And how do you that kind of learning experience, that sort of online classroom type thing, how do you do that? So we started looking into different tools and that kind of thing. There wasn't anything quite right for what we needed. So instead I signed up for an online web development course so that I could take my basic web design skills and learn how to create this platform. And there are tools out there, they just require a different level of developer skills than I had to be able to use them. It's not drag and drop, you can't use them out of the box. So I needed to learn how to make that work for what we wanted. So we spent about 3 months learning, and then after that building the website. And once we knew that we had a platform, then we could start filming classes.
And she did an amazing job, I have to just say, because that 2 minutes of discussion was such hard work, and I would never have even known where to start, so we wouldn't be here without you.
But then we looked into whether we could get somebody else to do it, but the quotes that we were getting for building this kind of platform, we knew we just couldn't afford. And we also knew we weren't 100% certain that we were on the right track, that there was demand for it. So the only way we could justify doing it was to build it ourselves at a very low cost, so that we could test out whether there was a market for it and whether we were on the right track, so that we could then invest in it afterwards. But we just wanted to kind of make sure that it was definitely, we were onto something.
That we had a business.
Absolutely. But we've learned so much. I mean, it's not just the filming, it's the editing, it's kind of
marketing.
There's
graphics.
So many angles to the business that we've had to learn on the job. And so we've both grown massively in terms of our skill set. We were always good at sewing, but now we can add videography, editing, web development,
blog
marketing,
writing, email writing,
advertising, search engine optimization. Like, there's so many different things that we've had to learn. And it's great, it's been really fulfilling. And the thing we get more excited about than anything else is when you see an order come through from halfway around the world, and you just think, well, that's someone we wouldn't have got to teach if we'd have carried on doing what we were doing. So
exactly,
especially with COVID, a lot of businesses had to take that step. So we were really grateful that we'd done that off of our own backs,
and we were already
in our own
established.
time, without having that extra pressure of trying to do it in the backdrop of a pandemic.
I get a little kick every time I send an email. So the email system that we use will show you a geographical split around the world, and so like we have 50 openings of emails in Hungary and things like that, and I just think, how amazing is that just, you know, somewhere I've never been, 50 people are opening my email because they're interested in what we're doing. And you know, it did take something that was very small, was very kitchen table, was very niche in the West Country, and that's how we still see ourselves, is two West Country mums with kids doing a kitchen table business, and it still really is that, but we made it,
except now we're in a studio, and and you know, we're down in our local town, and
we have evolved.
Our kids are still in school down the road, but we're still very much mums working, you know, making our business work around family life.
I don't think full time.
No. I'd be up for running some events at some point, I think.
Yes.
I love it when you see kind of sewing weekends and stuff. You know, like the idea where you hire a big house and everybody comes and you sew for the weekend and whatever. Yeah. So those kind of one-off events I would be tempted by.
Or sewing shows or something like that, where you're doing it in conjunction with somebody else, and you just come along, that kind of thing. But I don't think we would ever kind of run actual physical regular classes again. It's just the business now, I don't think there's any time for that. There's no scope for it. You have to either do one or the other, I think.
Yeah, and I think we've got so many ideas for the online business. There's so many other classes that we want to bring out, that there's always such a long list, and we're still very much excited about that. So putting that on hold to do something different couldn't be where we'd want to be at the moment.
No.
So never say never, but certainly for the foreseeable future, that's not on our radar.
No, they will be few and far between if they happen. There'll be special events if they happen. We do live absolutely very close to each other. We're probably, I don't know,
100 yards?
100 yards. So we live on a crossroad. So there's one road going that way and one road going that way. I'm on one corner and Rachel's diagonally opposite on the other corner. Yes. So when I open my curtain windows, my bedroom curtain windows, I can see her house. I can see her car. I can see whether she's in. I can see whether she's in her sewing room.
Yeah.
I can spy on you.
I don't have the luxury of spying. I have to go to the end of my drive to be able to see Nikki's house, and
it's only because I'm higher up than you.
Yes, and I live in a little cottage and the windows are quite low, so I can't really see an awful lot. But yes, we are very close. Depending on how busy that road is, sometimes it can take quite a while to get to you,
like
because
a minute and a half
to cross the road.
The commute is not too much.
Yeah, exactly. But we are very close. We've joked before that we're close enough that we could set up like a pulley system and we could like winch things over to each other.
With a little basket.
And we're also so close that one Christmas we all bought our kids walkie-talkies, and so they could all chat to each other. This is before they were old enough to have phones and that sort of thing.
But I think that closeness, that actual logistical closeness, is something that really helped when we first set up the business.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Being opposite each other and just being able to run across the road, and we do that a lot. You know, in movies where you say, like, a neighbour turning up saying, "Can I borrow a bowl of sugar?" We're always doing things like that. I haven't got any spaghetti. Have you got spaghetti? And running across the road to grab it.
I borrow a lot more from Nikki because she's a much more of a grown-up than I am, and she has all the things.
Just
whereas we might have more in terms of like tools and DIY related stuff, but then in terms of like just general forgetfulness, like I've got no cumin, or or
dishwasher
have
tablets.
You got a
is your
spare loo
favourite
roll until tomorrow? You know, those kind of things. That's where Nikki comes into her own. And the funniest thing is the random combination of things that will be carried across the road, like. it's not unusual to be carrying an ironing board under one arm, a Pyrex dish with a bra in it. Because I borrowed a strapless bra from her yesterday. She cooked me something in a Pyrex dish, and we've decided to swap ironing boards. There's always a very random combination of things going across the road to each other, which is very funny. Sometimes I turn up and I'm just like,
I don't know, just
I'm giving you these today. And we just chuckle about how random it must look to other people.
I have accused you sometimes of trying to surreptitiously move in one item at a time by bringing things across to my house.
Yes.
And vice versa. I'm trying to move into yours. So yes, we are logistically very close.
Yes.
And that has helped with a lot of things. It helps with the business, it helps with our friendship, and it has made us more close as well.
Absolutely.
And it also means neither of us can ever leave the village.
No,
we can never sell our houses.
We're locked in forever. So, next question, are our families friends? Well, yes, I think it's fair to say that they are. So,
whether they like it or not.
Yes, it was almost like, it was inevitable. But one of the things that wasn't necessarily obvious initially was how good friends our husbands would become. Because they always got on with each other, and we spent so much time together that they kind of obviously did by default. And, I'd go as far as to say that they enjoyed each other's company. But there's a proper full-on bromance going on these days. They are literally best mates, and they speak to each other as much as we do, and they don't run a business together. They're constantly like
texting each other.
Yeah,
the amount of times I turn around to my husband of an evening, I say, "What? Who are you texting?" It was just Damien.
Yeah.
Okay. So all right.
Yeah, my husband will do kind of a laugh that's kind of like he thinks he's really funny kind of laugh, just like, oh yeah, that was funny, I'm funny, and so I know that he's texting Tim and say something that he thinks is really funny.
And the kids are friends. They're all teenagers now, so they come and go. Yeah. But actually, they're kind of like. They are like family.
Yes.
It's
like
that
cousins.
kind of like cousins. Yeah. They'll always get on. They always have a lot of love for each other, but they might not see each other a lot. When they do see each other, it's at school because they all go to school together. Yeah. But it's not necessarily a lot of quality time that they're spending with each other at the moment because they're teenagers.
Yeah, they spent a lot more time together when they were younger, but they've all got their own friendship groups now.
Yeah.
And they spend most of their time out with their friends or in their rooms because they're teenagers.
Yes.
So when we do all get together, when we get both families together, then they'll very much get involved and they'll play board games with us, and they'll join in the conversation and that kind of thing, and eat with us and whatever. But unless we've arranged something, they will generally hang out with their other friends.
Yes.
But that's to be expected for teenagers, isn't it?
Yeah, we need to just let them evolve their own friendships. But it is like they're cousins, so they're kind of, there's always a love there.
They'll always care about each other. They just don't always spend a lot of time together.
They don't want to hang out. But we spent the last couple of Christmases together, and we often go to the pub. We usually see each other in the pub at the weekends. And obviously Rachel and I are together. Not necessarily most days now. I think we're doing a lot more laptop work. We're doing a lot of making a lot of changes to the website and things like that. So we're doing a lot.
I think COVID proved to us that we could work independently. So we do a lot more of that now. And we only get together when it's something that we need to work on together,
or when we miss each other.
Yes, sometimes it would just be, haven't seen you for a couple of days. Should we have a coffee?
Yes.
But yeah. I mean, if we don't see each other in person, we'll FaceTime each other.
Yes.
So we will see each other one way or another every day. But
can you remember, and this is a serious question, can you remember any day where we didn't have a chat on either text or FaceTime or in person?
No. Not for the last 5 years at least.
No. It's like she's constantly with me.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly
First
with you.
text that I receive every day is from Nikki saying, "Morning, how are you?" And then me responding back, and that's just normal for us, isn't it?
I used to wake you up in the morning, and then you told me, could you just text me slightly later?
Yeah.
She'd
be up at 6 and her brain would be going,
too early. And it's still the same.
But it's because you text me with a work question, and I'd be like, I haven't had my coffee yet. I don't know. Give me an hour.
I've stopped doing that.
Yes,
now.
absolutely.
Let's have the social chat.
You wake up with things on your mind. That's
yes, I do that.
Yeah.
So we're going to look forward now to see where we are going to be in the future. So it's quite appropriate that we're in our lovely studio.
Yeah.
Because this is definitely where we've started at the kitchen table and ended up here.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time in here,
Yes.
filming and that sort of thing. So you know, for the next year or so, we've got quite a good plan in terms of the classes that we want to film and that sort of thing. So so there's lots and lots of different. We've got some plans for some more kind of simple makes for beginners, but also for some more hacking classes, more fitting classes, but also more detailed classes like trouser making, coat making, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Things like copying your own clothes. So we've got lots and lots of plans for content that we want to bring you in terms of classes. We certainly, I know we're less active on social media these days, but that's only because sometimes it's hard to fit everything in, but we certainly aren't consciously moving away from that. We still very much want to carry on YouTube, and we want to, you know, continue on Instagram and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes it's just a case of juggling everything, and sometimes a certain kind of one of those platforms drops off a little bit whilst another one gets a bit more attention.
Yeah, I think it's only natural, to be honest.
Absolutely,
There's a lot. We've got a lot to do, and there's only the two of us.
Yeah,
we only
exactly.
ever do everything, you know, that we do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to do.
So yeah, I think that will keep us busy for a little while. But in terms of kind of plans for the future in general, I think it's just safe to say we're not going anywhere. We're friends for life. That's never going to change. We certainly have big ambitions for our business. We certainly don't see that changing anytime soon.
No.
So the future is really just more of the same.
Yes. But more goodness,
Yes.
more happiness, more joy, more smiles, more fun,
Absolutely.
and bringing you guys lots of fun content and lots of really good classes that you can get stuck into.
Yeah. So, if there are any other questions that you would like to ask us that we didn't answer here, anything you've been dying to know, then drop us a comment below and we will do our best to reply to you, or maybe even do a follow-up video at some point in the future.
But these are the questions that we get asked the most. But if you've got any more interesting ones, we'd love to hear them.
Absolutely.
So, we'll see you next time, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Okay. This is Stitch Sisters backstory. Take one.
Stitch Sisters history.
History. No, I'll find you an hour.
Right, what's the first question, Madam?
Okay. We need to do an intro first.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, so nuts to do at the end.
You sure? This is me editing it.
That's what we do with classes.
Are you really sisters? Are you really sisters?
Well, what do you think?
Now that you're blonde, I think it's more confusing.
It is, but unless we were sisters that were estranged and brought up in different countries and therefore have different accents, or you acquired a strong Scottish accent as an adult after we went our separate ways.
This is my acting skills, ladies. This is my acting skills. No, we're not sisters.
No.
We never have been. We are sisters in the stitch.
Yes, Stitch Sisters. Well, we were thinking of a name. We liked the alliteration, but also we, by that point, were firm friends. And
Yes.
friends to the point where we feel like sisters.
Yes.
So we thought, well, why the hell not be sisters?
Also, Scissor Sisters was taken.
It was taken by
the Scissor
by the Scissor Sisters. But yes, and also with Scissor Sisters, you can do anything with scissors. It doesn't necessarily indicate sewing. It could be could be hair cutting. It could be anything. So
Yeah.
but stitch. Yes, stitching is stitching. Isn't it?
Yes. So we do feel like